Well, the series didn't exactly turn out as planned. It also turned out as planned somewhat at the same time. Let's just say one person definitely stole the show and had a big coming out party. You know what I mean? It's time for another episode of... Hi there, it's Brett Hornby here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, and welcome back to another episode of my Calgary Flames in the Stanley Cup Playoffs. We're still in Season 4, episode number 17, and now we have the first round in the books. So now, in this episode, it's time to recap the first round that we had between the Calgary Flames and the Dallas Stars. And I'm going to say this series definitely turned out not as I expected, and I'm going to say kudos to one player who definitely did everything humanly possible to advance in the playoffs, but came just short. But when you look at the numbers, you'd be like, holy cow, can't believe it. And then the fact that, it's a kind of a case, it was two different series. What we started off with, and then ultimately what we ended off with. And was I ultimately a happy camper at the end of the series? Well, you have to wait and see what I give my final thoughts. But before I bring my notes and recap how the series went, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, home of the Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, Stampeders, and the Cavalry FC, just make sure you hit like, subscribe, and I also have my other social media links down in the description below, and of course I also put timestamps in there if you want to jump to any particular game or segment. But in this, now that we're into the playoffs, it's all going to be game recaps and stats and final thoughts, because I spun out the Stockton Heat quick hits. I put those in separate videos, so you can see that playlist if you want to see how our Stockton Heat doing with the American Hockey League. But this is totally the Calgary Flames and the Dallas Stars best of 7 series, round 1 in the Western Conference quarterfinal. And of course I had to play out like it did, if you know what I mean, once we get there. So let's start the recap. So the this game 1 happened back on Tuesday, May 3rd, with the Calgary Flames having the first in the Pacific Division and taking on the first wildcard. The Calgary Flames had home ice in this series, and might say did play a role in the outcome of it. So the first 2 games of this best of 7 series was in Calgary in front of the Sea of Red. So I mentioned Tuesday, May 3rd, the Calgary Flames first hosted the Dallas Stars. This was an 8 p.m. puck drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome, and definitely they were rough early. And I'm going to say John Klingberg and Matthew Tkachuk and Jamie Benn, also Milan Lucic also wanted to try to chirp in this series as well. And also you got to say how this series started, definitely how the series evolved, changed to the approach that both teams taken. However, early in the game, it was Calgary who got the first power play of the series, and actually struck first in the series, as it was Elias Lindholm who scored on the power play at 5:01 of the first period. So Calgary took a 1-0 lead, and it was assisted by Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk. So Calgary starts off well so far in the playoffs. Also continue on in the first round, as I mentioned, there were definitely a lot of rough stuff. It was 1-0 for Calgary well into the first period, and it stayed 1-0 after the first period. However, there was some rough stuff to highlight after the end of the first period, as Matthew Tkachuk was fighting with Michael Ruffalo, I should say, of the Dallas Stars. However, there was another fight that took place outside the play, which ultimately led to two players being kicked out of the game, as it was John Klingberg and Rasmus Andersson for Calgary. So Calgary and Dallas were down one defenseman each in this game, so it was still 1-0 for Calgary. And Calgary started off hot as they outshot the Dallas Stars 11-3, and I'm going to say this is nothing. I'm going to get to later in the series. So it was still 1-0 for Calgary. Going to the second period, minus Rasmus Andersson for Calgary and John Klingberg for Dallas. So going into the second period, there was definitely still some more rough stuff. There were just coincidental minors. I mean, Michael Ruffer was also roughing up with Oliver Shillington, and Jamie Benn also was tripping up with Oliver Shillington. And also the fact that Matthew Tkachuk served as a too-many-men penalty. But in the second period, things did settle down a little bit, but there was no scoring report, so still 1-0 for Calgary after the second period, and the shots were 10-9 for Dallas in the second period. Going to the third period, things definitely still did settle down for the both sides. Actually, there were no penalties to report, and the Calgary Flames essentially were trying to do the same thing they did in 2004, which was shut down the other opponent, limit the shots for the Calgary Flames going against. And the Calgary Flames are finding out that we had Jacob Markstrom in net for the Calgary Flames. Well, Jake Oettinger, we're going to find out pretty soon that this guy also came to show up and do his best on the wall impression. But ultimately, the Calgary Flames weren't able to get any more goals in this game, but the Dallas Stars did not score any themselves, so the Calgary Flames, they ultimately won this game 1-0. And the shots in net for the third period were 6-3 for Calgary. So overall, the shots on goal were 26-16 for Calgary, and this definitely felt like, 2004 all over again, how the Calgary Flames pride themselves on limiting their opponents to only 20 shots in net. But definitely were a lot of rough stuff in this one, especially Matthew Tkachuk was all over the ice. John Klingberg was also ready to make some enemies, and Jamie Benn as well for Dallas. So with this win, the Calgary Flames take a 1-0 series to lead. However, it was just one goal in this game. So that was game one in the best-of-7 series. Calgary wins 1-0 to take a 1-0 best-of-7 series lead, 1-0. So a lot of 1-0 in this one. So game two, this happened 2 nights later on Thursday, May the 5th, as the game was still in Calgary. It was still an 8 p.m. puck drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome. So what do we get in game two? Shall we say, after the Calgary Flames won the first one 1-0? Well, in this game, the Dallas Stars definitely, once again, were very physical. Early in this game, there was a cross-checking coincidental penalty between John Klingberg and Matthew Tkachuk 43 seconds in. And also, there was a coincidental slashing between Joel Cariffa and Blake Coleman of the Calgary Flames at 7:50. So the referees definitely were clamping down a lot more, which usually always seems to happen. Every year, at the start of the year, the referees say, we're going to call everything, we're going to clamp everything down. And then things level out. And then the playoffs once again, and then things level out because they don't want to turn in the game too much. However, ultimately, the Dallas Stars, they did get their first goal of the series. It was in the first period, as it was Joel Pavelski. Definitely one player that has known for being a big playoff performer from his San Jose days and a couple years ago with the Dallas Stars. So Joe Pavelski scored his first of the playoffs, first goal for the Dallas Stars at 7:47 of the first period, and it was Jason Robertson who got the assist. So we had a 1-0 lead for the Dallas Stars, and actually that's the only goal in the first period. So Dallas had a 1-0 lead going into the second period, and there was still a lot more rough stuff continue. So going into the second period, there were another coincidental minors dished up early in the second period. Tied to Foley for Calgary and Ropey Hinch for Dallas. So some more rough stuff to highlight there. And also at 12:34 of the second period, Trevor Lewis for Calgary and Vladislav Nemestikov had a roughing penalties as well. So there was a little less rough stuff, but there was still rough stuff going on for both sides in this game. So, and obviously there was no scoring to report in the second period. So Dallas still had a 1-0 lead. Going into the third period, I mentioned the shots. Well, the shots were 9-6 for Dallas in the first period, but it was 11-7 for Calgary in the second period. So how did things go in the third period? Well, once again, as the game tightens up a little more, there were no penalties dished out in the third period, but the Calgary Flames, they were looking to get something going on the offense. However, Jake Oettinger, he did his best Jacob Markstrom impression, as he did actually close the door for the Dallas Stars. Dallas was able to get one more goal in this game via an empty netter. It was Mike Raffl got his first this season by Tyler Seguin and Josh Horkabs. Mike Raffl got his first in the empty net at 18:51. So that gives Dallas a 2-0 lead, and ultimately the Dallas Stars, they tied up the series at 1 apiece. Calgary did outshoot the Dallas Stars 12-7 in the third period, and overall 29-23. So ultimately this is what Dallas wanted in this series, is get a split in Calgary. So now it's 1-1 after 2 games. So that was game number 2. So game 3, this happened 2 nights later on Saturday, May the 7th, as now the scene shifts to Dallas for the next 2 games. The game series all tied up at 1 apiece. So we had a 7:30 puck drop at the American Airlines Arena. So how did things go now that the series has shifted to Dallas? I'm going to say this game definitely opened up a little more, both sides. I'm going to say the rough stuff, I'm going to say, still was there, especially at the 1:22-minute mark of the first period. John Klingberg and Matthew Tkachuk, they fought, and then Luke Glendening had a cross-checking against Johnny Gaudreau. So rough stuff early in the first period to set a tone for the Dallas fans, and then there was still more rough stuff at the 4.5-minute mark. Joe Carretta ice sticking on Blake Coleman, and Elias Lindholm had goalie interference on Brad Faska. And then there was a coincidental minor for Trevor Lewis for Calgary and Joe Pavelski. Interference of Joe Pavelski, and Joe Pavelski had slashing against Johnny Gaudreau. It's at 7:27, so there was still more rough stuff to highlight in this one. However, unlike the first 2 games, there were a few more goals in this game for both sides. The first goal of the game actually went to the Dallas Stars, as there was Brad Faska, who got his first of the season from Lindell and Heiskanen. So that was 8:21 of the first period. So Dallas now took a 1-0 lead at that point of the game. However, Trevor Lewis, he tied it up for the Calgary Flames at 13:45, his first this season from Lucic and Zadorov. So after the first period, with both teams trading goals, it was a 1-1 game going into the second period. And then going into the second period, there was a little rough stuff. However, there was still coincidental minor with Mike Raffl and Oliver Shillington at 12:45. And I believe in this game, this was the first game of 2 that Jamie Benn actually paid a $5,000 fine for an incident. I believe that happened in Game 3, if I recall. But going into the second period, Elias Lindholm actually scored at the 3:40-minute mark of the second period for his second of the series of the playoffs, with Johnny Gaudreau, Matt Tkachuk also collected assists. So Calgary regained the lead, got their first lead of this game in Dallas. However, later in the second period, it was Joe Pavelski who tied it up for Dallas, getting his second goal of the series from Heiskanen and Ryan Suter. 11:41 of the second period. So after the second period, we had a 2-2 game going into the third period. And then when it comes to shots, there were definitely a lot more shots for both sides in this game. Calgary outshot Dallas 13-12 in the first period, and Calgary outshot Dallas 16-12 in the second period. Third period definitely felt a little frustrating and a little too familiar as a Calgary Flames fan, because I felt the Calgary Flames were outplaying Dallas for much of the third period and much of this game and pretty much of the series overall. However, there were definitely, Jake Oettinger was definitely standing tall for the Dallas Stars. So did Jacob Markstrom for Calgary. But once I done recapping the series, look at the numbers. Jacob Markstrom was the second best goalie in the series despite the numbers that he had. But in the third period, it was still tied at 2. About the halfway minute mark, however, Calgary took a penalty midway through the third period, as it was Blake Coleman got slashing on Joe Pavelski. And then late in that power play, it was Joe Pavelski who did score on the power play, his second of the game and third of the playoffs from the Messickov and Klingberg. So Dallas took a 3-2 lead at that point, and then ultimately, with a second left in the game, as Calgary pulled the goalie to try to tie it up late, it was Roby Hintz who got his first of the season from Yakiaba as he got the assist, with barely 1 second left in the empty net. So ultimately, the Dallas Stars, they took their first lead at the series, winning the first one at home 4-3. So ultimately, the Dallas Stars, they took a 2-1 lead in the series, and I just felt after this game, the Calgary Flames, despite being outplayed, weren't getting the puck luck, and the offense was drawing up, and Jake Oettinger definitely was making his presence known. That I felt like Game 4 might as well have been Game 7 at this point, as Calgary were down 2-1 on the road in Dallas, as Calgary outshot Dallas 12-8 in the third period, and ultimately outshot Dallas 41-32. So definitely it was a frustrating game for the Calgary Flames, but now they're down 2-1 to the Dallas Stars, facing Game 4, essentially a must-win, because they either were going to be down 3-1 coming back home to the Sea of Red, or tied up at 2 and still having a chance. So what happened? So Game 4, this happened on Monday, May the 9th, as the game was still in Dallas, as the scene was still in Dallas. I'm going to say pretty much wasn't much must-win for the Calgary Flames, just to try to work off those first-round demons, as my Calgary Flames, they like to struggle in the first round and even like to make things a little more scary than they need to be. However, on Monday, May the 9th, and this was another 7:30 puck drop at the American Airlines Arena, the Calgary Flames, they really came up firing on the Dallas Stars, and there were a little less extracurricular activities as the games definitely ramped up a little more. However, one thing to highlight early in this game is at the 1:33-minute mark, which came kind of a storyline for later that's familiar to Flames fans, as Vladislav Nemeskov had a legal check to Johnny Gaudreau's head. So Johnny Gaudreau got banged up early in this game. However, he got to stay in the game. The other interesting thing in this game is the Calgary Flames actually dressed 7 defensemen. They actually dressed Michael Stone as a forward, and they sat Brett Ritchie. But there was no scoring to report in the first period. But the Calgary Flames, they definitely figured if they were going to maybe have a chance to beat Jake Oettinger, is to throw everything and the kitchen sink at him. And that's definitely the strategy that the Calgary Flames took on. And I felt that this game turned the series around, I'm going to say eventually, for the Calgary Flames' favor. So with no scoring to report after the first period. Going into the second period, there was still no scoring well into the halfway mark of the second period. However, Dallas took a penalty at the 8:46 minute mark. Was Rad Faska. He had a high sticking on Johnny Gaudreau. So Johnny Gaudreau definitely took a few lumps in this game, but ultimately it was Rasmus Anderson who got his first goal of the playoffs from Matthew Tkachuk and Tara Toffoli on the power play. So Calgary took a 1-0 lead at that point, and actually that was the only goal of the second period. So Calgary had a 1-0 lead at that point. Things were still feeling a little tense, but the Calgary Flames outshot the Dallas Stars 20-14 in the second period alone. However, in the third period, I think things were starting to get a little easier. Feeling a little easier for Flames fans. As the Flames fans, they kept putting the pedal to the metal. Excuse me there. But in the third period, ultimately, Johnny Gaudreau got poked on a breakaway, so he was awarded with a penalty shot at the 7:47 minute mark of the third period. And what did Johnny Gaudreau do with that, as he was holding on from John Klingberg? Well, actually, he made Dallas pay. As Johnny Gaudreau, he put one through the 5-hole on Jake Oettinger. So Johnny Gaudreau got his first goal of the series on the penalty shot goal. So Calgary took a 2-0 lead at that point. I'm going to say Johnny Gaudreau, he definitely took his lumps in the first two periods of that game. He looked like a man on a mission after it. Kind of reminded me of Don't Piss Off Joe McGinley back in the day, not waking up that monster. But Johnny Gaudreau, he definitely still was fighting off some demons about not showing up in playoffs. And you know what? There's going to be one more time I'm going to mention Johnny Gaudreau that I think he is going to make himself a legend. So continuing on in the third period, Calgary actually was able to make it 3-0, as it was Elias Lindholm who got his third goal of the playoffs, with Johnny Gaudreau, Noah Hanifin assisting at 11:53 the third period. So we had a 3-0 lead for Calgary at that point. Dallas was able to solve Jacob Markstrom in this game, as Tyler Seguin got his first goal of the playoffs with Joe Pavelski, Ropey Hintz assisting on it. It was a power play goal at 15:03, so Dallas made it 3-1 for Calgary at that point, as of course Matthew Tkachuk took a mere Heiskanen penalty. It's funny how those penalties work, and whoever gets the penalty. And then with Calgary still outplaying the Dallas Stars, ultimately when Jake Oettinger was pulled out of net for the extra attacker, Calgary was able to put it away in the empty net, as Michael Backlund got the empty netter at 19:38 of the third period to make it 4-1. Michael Backlund from Kyle Youngkirk and Trevor Lewis. So ultimately, this was a huge clutch win for the Calgary Flames, as they defeated the Dallas Stars 4-1 to tie this thing up at 2-2. This definitely was the huge swing game, and I felt this game definitely turned the tides in the favor of the Calgary Flames. And this game also emphasized the shoot everything at Jake Oettinger, because in the third period, the shots were 15-13 overall. Or in the third period overall, the Calgary Flames, they outshot the Dallas Stars 54-35. And I think this actually set a record for most shots the Calgary Flames took in a non-overtime playoff game. So this was definitely the turning point of the series on the Calgary Flames' strategy on dealing with the Dallas Stars and Jake Oettinger. And I think in this game, it was back-to-back games. Now I think I remember that Jamie Benn also took another fine for $5,000, so he took $10,000 in fines in the series. So now things are tied up at 2-2. Coming back home to the Sea of Red, I felt a little better about things, but it's still a 2 out of 3. So that was game number 4. So game number 5, this happened on Wednesday, May the 11th. Now the series is back in Calgary. This was a 7:30 puck drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome. So what did we get for Game 5? Shall we say? I'm going to say the Dallas Stars definitely were still hanging around because of Jake Oettinger. However, this game definitely felt a little more tense. There were definitely a lot less extracurricular activities because there were actually only 5 penalties all in this game. And no fights to highlight, as that's pretty much what you expect as you get further into the series as things tighten up. However, there was no scoring to report in the first period, so it was 0-0. Shots actually were even at 7 apiece, as I think both teams were playing a little tentative, knowing that someone's going to be facing an elimination game in the next game. So going into the second period, it was Dallas. Dallas actually scored first. It was Jason Robertson who got his first goal of the series. He was being pretty much been silent the whole series, assisted by Jamie Benn and Eric Lindell at 13:21. So Dallas had a 1-0 lead at that point. And actually that was the only goal to report in the second period. So Dallas actually had a 1-0 lead going into the third period. Shots were 9 apiece, so it was 16-16 in shots for both sides going into the third period. However, the third period, I think the Calgary Flames definitely woke up knowing that the game in the series was on the line, because the Calgary Flames actually did rally in the third period. First, it was Michael Backlund who got a second of the playoffs, assisted by Andrew Mangiapane and Blake Coleman at 6:29 to tie up the game at 1 apiece. And then ultimately, Andrew Mangiapane, he finally found the scoreboard. There, back in net as he scored his first of the playoffs at 10:38 of the third period, assisted by Michael Backlund and Nikita Zadorov. And then ultimately, it was Trevor Lewis. He put it away in the empty net, his second of the playoffs, with Johnny Gaudreau and Elias Lindholm assisting at 19:02. So ultimately, the Calgary Flames, they rallied in the third period to take this one 3-1, but even more importantly, they took a 3-2 series lead with a chance to finish off the Dallas Stars at home. And the shots, well, Calgary outshot the Dallas Stars 16-5. So ultimately, the Calgary Flames outshot the Dallas Stars overall 32-21. So, did my Calgary Flames finish off the Dallas Stars in Game 6, or are we going to go need a 7th game back at the Sea of Red? Well, let's find out. So Game 6, this happened on Friday, May the 13th, as the Calgary Flames were in Dallas, up 3-2. This was a 7-3 puck drop at the American Airlines Arena. Calgary Flames looking to finish off the Dallas Stars and close out the series, but this is the Calgary Flames we're talking about. They don't like to make things easy, and they've got some familiar feelings that I've seen too many times from this one. So going into the first period, it was not too much fisticuffs early in the first period. However, Dallas actually was able to score first, not until the 14:52 minute mark of the first period, as Roby Hintz got his second of the playoffs from Pavelski and Robertson. So Dallas took a 1-0 lead. That was the only score in the first period. So Dallas, they took a 1-0 lead going into the second period, facing elimination at home. And the shots were 18-10 for Calgary. So Calgary did their part, but Jake Oettinger definitely was strong to the task. But the Dallas Stars, they fought back even harder in the second period. As in the second period, Mike Raffel, who scored for Dallas, his second of players from Kirvrata, the assist, to make it 2-0 for Dallas at 6:04. So now Dallas had a 2-0 lead, and I was saying, oh boy, of course the Calgary Flames can't close out the series and they have a chance. But then they teased me and got me some hope, because later in the second period, Michael Stone playing forward. Yes, Michael Stone did get in the action, and he scored his first of the playoffs at 8:09 in the second period from Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk. So that made it 2-1 for Dallas at that point. And then just under 3 minutes later, Michael Backlund. Yes, Michael Backlund tied it up for the Calgary Flames. He got his third of the playoffs from Michael Stone and Rasmus Andersson. So that made it 2-2 at that point at 11:59 of the second period. And then later in the second period, it was Miro Heiskanen who put Dallas back on the board. His first of the playoffs from Ryan Faska and Ryan Suter at 17:32. So Dallas now had a 3-2 lead. And that's how things stood after the second period. And the shots, Dallas had a better shot differential than Calgary in the second period, as Dallas outshot Calgary 17-9 in the second period. Then the third period, it definitely was a lot more rough stuff at the end of the game, if you look at the penalty summary. But essentially, the third period, it was tense. The Calgary Flames couldn't solve Jake Oettinger. Dallas also did struggle with solving Jacob Markstrom. But ultimately, it wasn't until the empty net when Calgary pulled the goalie for the extra attacker that ultimately Tyrus again put it away in the empty net. His second of the playoffs from up against Michael Raffel to make it 4-2 in 1938. So that made it 4-2 for Dallas, and essentially saying that we're sending this thing back to Calgary for Game 7. However, there was definitely some rough stuff at the end of the game, as Nikita Zadorov and Nigel Lundell were roughing. So was Vlaskov, Meskov, and Nikita Zadorov. And Nikita Zadorov and Neil Lucic each had game misconducts from the Rusticuffs in this game. And then the other story of this game was that Nikita Zadorov, it looked like he took a high hit on Luke Glendening, but essentially he was waived clean and be able to play in Game 7. Because when you look at it, it's like, well, you can't really penalize him for being 6'6". But this was definitely a tough loss for the Calgary Flames, as in the third period, Dallas actually outshot Calgary 13-11. So Dallas outshot Calgary 40-38. So that means we're going to need all 7 games in this one for all the marbles. So that was game number 6. So here we go, Game 7 coming up. So Game 7, this happened on Sunday, May the 15th, as the Calgary Flames got the least host Game 7 at home at the Scotiabank Saddle, 7:30 p.m. puck drop. Game 7 definitely has not been kind to the Calgary Flames in recent history, as the last time the Calgary Flames hosted a Game 7 at home was in 2006 against the Anaheim Ducks. And they crapped the bed in that game, and the Calgary Flames last won a Game 7 at home in 1989, when my childhood favorite Flame, Joel Otto, scored the overtime winner in that lopsided series. Will this game come down to something like that? Well, I'm going to say it did. I'm going to say it was hard on the nerves, I would say. Especially when Dallas scored first. Jamie Benn scored 40 seconds into the first period to make it 1-0 for Dallas. So just before the Sea of Red was able to sail in, Dallas was already up 1-0. And then other questions that we ask in the series is, I haven't mentioned Tyler Toffoli, Matthew Tkachuk scoring much, and Johnny Gaudreau. Well, maybe those questions will be answered in this one. But it was Calgary, despite being down 1-0 to the Dallas Stars, they were terribly outplaying the Dallas Stars, throwing everything on Jake Oettinger, because they knew if they were going to advance, they were going to have to do that. So in the first period, Calgary outshot Dallas 17-8, but they still find themselves down 1-0, which that's the other scary factor too, is being stoned by a hot goalie, or a goalie that has coming out party. So going into the second period, actually, Calgary was able to tie it up early, and it was Tyler Toffoli. He got his first of the power play on a tip from Oliver Schillingstott and Michael Stone. So it was 1-1 at that point, so Calgary struck back. However, just over 30 seconds later, the Dallas Stars say, hey, we want to lead again. So Vladislav Nemestikov scored his first of the playoffs. This was at 2:17, so 31 seconds after the Tyler Toffoli goal, Dallas had a 2-1 lead, and that was assisted by Pavelski and Robertson. However, Calgary was able to fight back as it was clutch. Matthew Tkachuk, he waited a little earlier to score a clutch goal, as Matthew Tkachuk scored at 8:44 on the second period. It was a beautiful pass from Jacob Markstrom and Johnny Gaudreau. So Matthew Tkachuk got his first goal of the playoffs. So the game's tied at 2-2. So we had a 2-2 game going into the third period. Calgary, they also outshot the Dallas Stars 26-4. That's in the second period alone. So what did the third period have in store? Well, the third period, there was definitely some back and forth play, but things were going down. Essentially, we're getting to must win or next goal will win it territory. Guess what? There was no scoring. So, of course, I'm going to have to say this one needed overtime. Ooh, overtime, game 7. And Dallas actually outshot Calgary 11-9 in this one. There wasn't too many penalties this game, given it was game 7. But in overtime, the Calgary Flames did actually have more chances, and actually they also had a power play in overtime, as it was Tyler Seguin, who took a slashing penalty at 5:08 of the overtime. So Calgary was able to put the pressure on, had more chances, but Dallas had some chances on the other end too. But thankfully, Jacob Markstrom, he was there to seal the deal. And keep in mind, this is sudden death overtime, so we keep playing until somebody scores. It's 5-on-5, 20-minute periods. So we still had no scoring after 10 minutes. No scoring after 12 minutes. And then towards the 15-minute mark, Calgary was in the Dallas zone. It was Elias Lindholm that took a shot and went off of Jake Oettinger's mask. And then Johnny Gaudreau, I guess he is this team's Joel Otto or Martin Gelinas. He shot it from a sharp angle just over Jake Oettinger's shoulder for his second of the playoffs and the golden goal, the series clinching goal. So ultimately, the Calgary Flames, they were able to win this one 3-2 in overtime and win a playoff series 4-3. Yeah, baby, as I gotta say. Johnny Gaudreau assisted from Elias Lindholm and Matthew Tkachuk, so it was 15:09 of the first overtime. The Calgary Flames were able to finally beat the Dallas Stars. So they won 3-2. Shots, it was 15-5 in overtime for a grand total of 67-28. Calgary outshot Dallas 67-28. Yes, we had overtime, but geez, it tells you how great Jake Oettinger played for the Dallas Stars. And it's going to be scary to look at these numbers, but I'm going to say this definitely was provided a big scare for the Calgary Flames, especially with someone needing to go to overtime. So as I say, the Calgary Flames won the series 4-3. Whew. As I say, as a fan, I've been on the wrong end of this too many times. But man, it's nice to be on the right end of this one. Which means this is not the last episode of Season 4. So the next episode, we'll be doing a second round preview. Who did the Calgary Flames get to play in the second round? Well, let's take a look at the player stats and then the playoff bracket, and then I'll give my final thoughts of the series before we tee up who we played to play. And I'm going to say I really like who we get to play. So when it comes to the Flames stats, actually Johnny Gaudreau, he actually had 8 points in this series. Some say that he only had 2 goals, but I'm going to say it's those 2 goals that he scored that mattered the most. That penalty shot goal in Game 4, and of course Game 7 in overtime. Second was Matthew Tkachuk, he had 6 points. And then Elias Lindholm had 5 points for third. And then fourth in scoring is Michael Backlund and Trevor Lewis. And Michael Stone, yes. They both had 3 points to round out the top 5 in points. Goals, well, Elias Lindholm actually, as of this recording, got nominated as the Selke finalist for best defensive forward, but Elias Lindholm and Michael Backlund each had 3 goals in the series and the playoffs. They're round up tied first. And then Johnny Gaudreau and Trevor Lewis each had 2, and then a bunch of players with 1 goal. But I'm going to say a big part of our offense being dried up was because of Jake Oettinger. Now when it comes to assists, well, Johnny leads the team with 6 assists. Matthew Tkachuk has 5 assists for second. And then Elias Lindholm, Michael Stone, and Nikita Zadorov. He jumped in on a few shots. Each have 2 assists, rounding out the top 5. And now, goaltending. Jacob Markstrom. He had really good numbers for the playoffs. How good of his numbers were they? Well, he's obviously 4-3 with that 1 shutout, 153 goals against average, and a .943 save percentage. Actually, that is good enough that Jacob Markstrom is in the record book for the best save percentage in a playoff series. So brace yourselves. Here is the Dallas Stars. Have leaders as Dallas Stars. Here's who led the scoring for the Dallas Stars in the series. Joe Pavelski led the way with 6 points, as he definitely showed up at times in this series. Tyler Seguin and Ropey Hintz and Jason Robertson, their top players, each had 4 points. And then Michael Raffel, Emir Heiskanen, and Ryan Suter each had 3 points for their top 5 in points. Goals, well, Joe Pavelski was the only Dallas Star with 3 goals. Tyler Seguin, Ropey Hintz, and Michael Raffel each had 2. And then Jason Robertson and everybody else had a goal in the playoffs for Dallas. Then the assists, well, the top 3 all had 3 assists. Joe Pavelski, Jason Robertson, and Ryan Suter each with 3. And then Tyler Seguin, Ropey Hintz, and Mira Heiskanen, and Yanni Hakapa each had 2, as well as ESL Lindell. But here's the scary numbers for Jake Oettinger. If you thought Jacob Markstrom's numbers were impressive, well, Jacob Markstrom definitely got outdueled by Jake Oettinger, as he is 3-4 in the playoffs with the series. He had a 181 goals against average and a .954 save percentage. Yes, I said .954 save percentage. And I think see some advanced stats actually said that Jake Oettinger had like the most impressive individual performance for a goaltender all time in a playoff series. That definitely was a huge reason why this series needed 7 games, and the fact that it needed to go to overtime and it got scary at points. But thankfully we were able to pull it off, because it definitely wouldn't have been all these what ifs if you weren't able to pull it off. And I say Jake Oettinger, he faced 272 saves on 285 shots. So yeah, I gotta give respect to Jake Oettinger, and he did everything humanly possible, other than scoring goals himself, to single-handedly drag the Dallas Stars in the second round. If he did, I think the Calgary Police Service would have to have a warrant for his arrest for stealing that series, because that was impressive. I mean, Jacob Markstrom, he had a pretty good playoff series. I mean, I'm going to say in his series, he only faced he only made 181 saves on 192 shots. But Jacob Markstrom had a good series. Let's say he had a 9.8 out of 10. Jake Oettinger had an 11 out of 10 for goaltending. That was definitely the story of the series. So those are the impressive stats. Was definitely the 2 goaltenders. So now let's take a look around the NHL on what happened elsewhere in the playoffs. So in the Western Conference, the Colorado Avalanche, they actually swept the Nashville Predators 4-0, the only sweep that we had in the first round. And then ultimately it was the St. Louis Blues. They defeated the Minnesota Wild 4-2. So the Colorado Avalanche and the St. Louis Blues will face off against each other. As I mentioned, the Calgary Flames, we were able to outlast the Dallas Stars 4-3. Well, brace yourselves. Battle of Alberta. Yes! The Edmonton Oilers. This is the only time I'm so happy that Edmonton won. They outlasted the Los Angeles Kings 4-3. So I'm looking forward to doing that series preview, as we are going to take on the Edmonton Oilers. I am looking so forward to that. It's been 31 years. So yes, we get to play the Edmonton Oilers. So now if you go to the Eastern Conference, the Florida Panthers, they actually were able to outlast the Washington Capitals 4-2. Florida had to win a couple games in overtime, and this was the Florida Panthers' first playoff series win since 1996, when they made that run all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals. Well, sorry Leaf Nation, I actually was pulling for the Leafs for two reasons. One, playing the Tampa Bay Lightning suck, and the fact that I was hoping for a Toronto-Calgary Stanley Cup Final, but unfortunately the Tampa Bay Lightning, they outlasted the Toronto Maple Leafs 4-3. Fortunately, Tampa Bay was able to outlast them, including winning Game 6 in overtime. And then, here's the other series, so we'll have a Battle of Florida. So we got a Battle of Alberta and a Battle of Florida. And then the other series in the Metropolitan, well, ultimately the Carolina Hurricanes, they outlasted the Boston Bruins 4-3. That was a homer series, not about Homer Simpson, but the fact that all 7 teams' games were won at home. And then the New York Rangers, they actually came back from 3-1 down and defeated the Pittsburgh Penguins 4-3, and the New York Rangers. If you were watching hockey on Sunday and you were watching the New York Rangers Pittsburgh Penguins game, and then the Calgary Flames and the Dallas Stars game, and if you're not a fan of those teams, you would have been spoiled, because both of those Game 7s went to overtime. However, being a Flames fan, and the fact that I've had my heart broken too many times in the first round, especially losing in overtime in the elimination games, it's actually not that much fun. But man, it felt so good to get that win. So that's what I have for my Calgary Flames in the Stanley Cup Playoffs first round recap. What are you going to remember from this series the most? I'm definitely going to remember Jake Oettinger. Definitely all the nightmares he's going to provide. The fact that we had to throw a million shots on him to outlast him, and ultimately just how poetic that the Game 7 happened. That Tyler Toffoli, he's still probably having Oettinger nightmares, and the fact that he was robbed all series. Matthew Tkachuk showing up, and of course Johnny Gaudreau, that ultimate exclamation point, scoring that overtime winner in Game 7 at home. Last time the Calgary Flames won Game 7 at home was in 1989, when my childhood favorite Flame, Joe Otto, scored against the Vancouver Canucks. And we know what happened in 1989. As I recall, the team was holding that silver trophy. Are we on this run? Because I just keep feeling the Calgary Flames, if they can get out of that first round, they can go on a run. However, the Edmonton Oilers are in the way, and I'm so looking forward to that series, and I'll be previewing and teeing up that series in the next episode. So the schedule will be in that video. This was all about the Calgary Flames and the Dallas Stars, and it was definitely a frustrating series. I definitely thought the Calgary Flames would have finished off the Dallas Stars in 5 or 6, but Jake Oettinger definitely gave us the scare. I was definitely scared for Game 7, and of course I had to go to overtime. Come on, Calgary Flames. Why do you have to do things the scariest way possible? I mean, it would have been awesome, but at the same time I wouldn't have fully enjoyed the game fully if I was at the game in Game 7. I would have been in the field position, but when I heard, I was half awake for that game, and I definitely was relying on my phone and notifications and hearing people cheering. So Game 7, I just got tense, and I saw it was going overtime, and I knew it was going to be restless till I know what happened the other way. And then when I heard people cheering downstairs, when I heard my phone, the goal horn, and I heard the Calgary horn not booing, I definitely had to yell, "Yeah, baby!" And yes, we get to play the Edmonton Oilers in the first round. Thank you. Thank you, sports gods. Now let's beat the heck out of the Edmonton Oilers, okay? Because they suck too. So yeah, what's going to be your take from this series? Could this been that scare for the Calgary Flames, kind of similar to 1989, where we had to outlast a goalie who was standing on his head, figuratively and literally? But he did everything he can, and hats off to you, Jake Oettinger. I have to. That was one heck of a performance. I just wish it just didn't come against us. But I'll be looking forward to seeing your career progress, if you can build off of that. And hopefully this wasn't a flash in the pan. But that's all I have for this series. So yes, there'll be another episode previewing the second round. So anyway, like I say, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, home of the Flames, Hitman, Roughnecks, and Stampeders, as well as the Calgary FC, just make sure you hit like, subscribe, as I mostly do talk Calgary sports on my YouTube channel, or recap games and stories and that. But I also do a variety of non-sports content, like personal vlogs, attempted comedy. And I also do share my experiences, let's say I'm on the road or at a sport event. And I do have some vlogging to go on my channel, so if that all sounds like it'd be interesting to watch, do follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey. You know what you do, just make sure you hit like, subscribe. Also, I have my other social links down in the description below, as I just mentioned. And I do have my second channel, Bright Hornby Shorts, where I exclusively put my short form content on there. So I appreciate like, subscribe, both here on my main channel, as well as my second channel. So yes, bring on the Edmonton Oilers and bring on the Battle of Alberta. That video is going to come, if you're watching this, the next day. So this was enough to get this video up, especially on a work night. So I was going to say, go Flames go. Thanks for being the Dallas Stars, and I just wish you didn't have to do it as scary as possible, but thanks for making me yell, yeah baby, we beat the Dallas Stars, and now this Edmonton Oilers series is going to be so much fun. We'll see how that goes, so thank you.